Section 1. The opening hook, 8 seconds of dread visual. A dim lantern swinging in an abandoned nursery. A child-sized coffin half open. A daguerreotype clutched in a skeletal hand. Narrator cold, measured. In the spring of 1872, Undertaker Elias Ramsey opened the casket of a dead child and found him holding the portrait of 2 adults no one had ever seen. When authorities tried to identify the faces, every record, every town ledger, every census page simply went blank. A thud echoes. What you're about to hear was nearly erased from American history, a story buried under church seals, institutional silence, and the kind of fear that rots through generations. This is the forgotten case of the dead child who held his false parent's portrait. And once you learn who those people really were, you may understand why this entire county tried to forget the boy ever existed. Fade in, archival, style map of rural Maryland, 1008, 170s. The case began in the riverside village of Hemlock's Ferry, a quiet settlement built by German immigrants and strict pietists who believed God watched their town more closely than others. They documented everything: births, marriages, illnesses, even broken barns. Yet somehow, the boy known only as Nathaniel, who appeared in town as if conjured from fog, had no recorded mother, no baptismal entry, and no trace of lineage. And the picture he held in death, 2 rigid, stern adults staring directly into the camera, was printed on a photographic plate style not manufactured in America until decades later. What follows is the reconstruction of a life erased, a town terrified, and an institution determined to keep one unholy truth sealed: the boy's parents may never have been human at all. Section 2. A town built on repetition and ritual. Hemlock's Ferry was a place obsessed with order, a town whose founding church, St. Armand's Chapel of Perpetual Witness, enforced daily rituals as strictly as tithes. Every doorframe held carved symbols. Every child attended morning catechism. Every adult attended evening confession. What mattered most was lineage, knowing who begat whom. It was the town's spine, the proof that every soul belonged exactly where the church said it did. So when a child appeared without lineage, people whispered. Nathaniel had been found near the ferry crossing in late November 1008, 171, barefoot, silent, staring at the water. He couldn't say who he belonged to, only that they left him while he slept. They had no names, he claimed, but he knew the shape of their hands, knew the sound of their voices. Voices, he said, came from under the floorboards at night. The church took him in, naming him after a biblical figure known for visions. Sister Miriam, a nun with a reputation for sensing broken spirits, claimed the boy carried a weight older than the town itself. His eyes were too knowing, his silences too deliberate. He didn't act lost, he acted watched. Stranger still, the women who bathed him noticed something unsettling. The child's skin held faint imprints, like fingertips pressing from the inside out, as if hands had once shaped him, molded him. The townspeople believed in curses, but they believed even more in silence. So no one questioned how a child with no records, no bloodline, and no mother could integrate so quietly into a community obsessed with ancestry. But the night he asked Sister Miriam why everyone had forgotten the other children, the ones who lived under the chapel floor, nightmares began to spread through Hemlock's Ferry like winter rot. Section 3. The orphanage with the locked room. The church's orphanage, St. Armand's Home for the Lost, was a small stone building beside the chapel. It housed a modest number of children, 8 at most, but the building itself had 12 rooms. 4 remained permanently locked. The nuns never spoke of those rooms. Nathaniel slept lightly, too lightly. The sisters often found him awake at night, sitting upright, head turned slightly as if listening. He sometimes asked why the other children weren't allowed upstairs, why the church pretended it had always had only 8 orphans. Sister Miriam's hands would tremble. There are no other children, Nathaniel, but he insisted he'd heard them. Small footsteps, soft humming, gentle tapping that traveled through the walls at night. Sometimes he whispered to someone unseen. Sometimes he asked for names no one recognized, names he claimed he had been given before the river. The sisters grew wary. Their eyes followed him in chapel, in classroom, even at meals. Yet the boy remained gentle, obedient, quiet. But quiet with purpose, as if holding a secret with both hands. Then one morning, the locked room at the far end of the second floor was found open. Dust disturbed, curtains torn, scratches on the floorboards in desperate lines. The children claimed they heard breathing inside the room during the night, breathing that wasn't human. A deep, hollow sound like wind being pulled through a throat that remembered life, but no longer needed it. When the nuns questioned Nathaniel, he only said, "They woke up because they thought my parents had returned." The sisters demanded to know who they were. The boy just pointed at the locked door and whispered, "The ones you left behind." Section 4. The first disappearance. The church tried to dismiss the incident as childish imagination, but fear spread like a contagion. Children refused to sleep alone. The rector conducted cleansing rites. And Sister Miriam began observing Nathaniel more closely, his posture, his drawings, the way he studied shadows with too much curiosity. Yet nothing prepared them for the disappearance of Lydia Pratt, one of the youngest orphans. She vanished on a rainless night in January, leaving behind only her small wooden doll placed neatly on her pillow. No sign of forced entry, no footprints in the corridor, no torn fabric, no cries, nothing. But her bed frame had been dragged 3 inches from the wall, revealing deep scratches gouged into the plaster from the inside. The next morning, while the whole orphanage searched, Nathaniel was found sitting in the chapel pews, staring forward, holding the torn hem of Lydia's nightdress in his hand. When Sister Miriam confronted him, voice shaking, he whispered. She heard them calling her name. She thought they were her parents. They always pretend to be parents. His expression was emotionless, almost serene. When asked who they were, he said, "The people from the picture." But there was no picture. No photograph of Nathaniel's parents existed, at least none they had ever seen. Rumors infected the town. Some whispered that the boy was a lure, a vessel. Others insisted he was the child of demons, marked from birth. The rector declared Lydia's disappearance the work of natural forces, runaway, abduction, or accident. But several children swore they saw Lydia walking down the hall the night she vanished, holding someone's hand. And that the hand wasn't a child's. Section 5. The portrait appears on February 6th. Something arrived at the orphanage that had no business being there. A wrapped parcel, no sender, no postage, no seal, only a single line of handwriting on it, returned to the child. Inside lay a daguerreotype portrait in a tarnished silver frame. It depicted a man and woman seated stiffly, dressed in clothing 30 years out of date, their expressions lifeless, their eyes glazed with a threatening familiarity. Sister Miriam froze. Nathaniel's face lit with recognition. "That's them," he said simply, touching the plate with an almost reverent fear. "My parents." The nuns exchanged horrified looks. The couple's faces were subtly distorted, eyes too dark, too deep, shapes blurred at the edges, as if the photographic chemicals recoiled from capturing them. Their clothes resembled old-world garments, but not from any local culture, something foreign, something forgotten. When asked how a photograph of his parents existed despite him having no memory of being photographed with them, Nathaniel answered, "They didn't like being remembered. They took pictures so they could be the ones to remember us." A chill swept through the orphanage. The rector ordered the photograph locked in his office. That night, the children dreamt of the same thing. 2 figures standing at the foot of their beds, hands reaching out, fingers too slender and too long. And Nathaniel dreamt of nothing at all because he didn't sleep. He sat awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, listening. When Sister Miriam asked what he heard, he replied, "They're searching for the one who left them." Section 6. The rector's investigation. The rector, Father Alphonse Reed, believed in control above all else. He believed the church kept darkness at bay through rules, lineage, and obedience, but the arrival of the portrait fractured that illusion. He studied the daguerreotype obsessively. Under lamplight, the faces seemed to shift, ever so slightly, when viewed from the corner of the eye. He brought in a traveling photographer to analyze the plate. The verdict was unsettling. "The chemicals are wrong." The photographer whispered, This wasn't made in any process known to us. And these faces, they weren't captured, they were imposed, almost painted with light." Father Reed felt a tremor run through him. He turned to scripture, to old Germanic texts, to colonial folklore. He stumbled upon references to beings known as Die Elternlosen, the parentless ones. Figures said to mimic mothers and fathers, luring children into forest shrines or abandoned houses. They created fake families. They created bonds through illusion, through imitation. He began to suspect Nathaniel was not abandoned. He was taken, shaped, returned, and left as something between child and messenger. One night, Father Reed confronted Nathaniel directly, slamming the portrait onto the table. "Who are these people? What do they want?" Nathaniel's eyes dimmed. "They don't want anything. They want to remember what they were. They use us for that, for memory, for form." Father Reed demanded the truth, but the boy only repeated a chilling phrase. "They made me from their silence." The rector locked the portrait away again. But that night, deep under the chapel floors, something began scratching. Section 7. The thing under the floor. The chapel had always creaked at night. Old wood, settled stone, winter frost. The sounds were familiar, harmless, explainable, but in late February, a new sound emerged, one that even the bravest parishioners refused to ignore. A deliberate tapping beneath the altar. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps again, like a coded message. The sound spread through the orphanage corridors and into the dormitory walls. Children cried, lamps flickered. Sister Miriam insisted they stay in prayer. Nathaniel, however, listened quietly, as if absorbing each vibration. When asked what it meant, he said, "They are asking if they can come inside again." "Inside what?" Sister Miriam asked. "Inside us." The nuns recoiled. The tapping escalated to a scraping, a dragging sound, something moving slowly beneath centuries, old foundation stones. The church elders gathered with lanterns, prying open a basement door sealed for decades. The air inside reeked of mold and something far worse, something sour, metallic, ancient. At the far end of the basement, the stone floor bulged upward, as if something beneath it pressed to rise. Father Reed sent everyone away, declaring the area forbidden, but the children reported seeing small, pale hands reaching through floor cracks at night. Sometimes they saw eyes dark as ink staring from beneath the boards. Nathaniel never appeared afraid. He whispered to the darkness as if in conversation, and the darkness seemed to listen. Section 8. The night of Singing March arrived with freezing rain and a sense of suffocation. The townspeople of Hemlock's Ferry began collapsing from exhaustion, sleepwalking, night terrors, memory lapses. Some swore they heard lullabies drifting down the streets at midnight. Others locked their windows and refused to speak to strangers. Then came the night the town still calls Die Nacht des Gesangs, the night of singing. It began at 2:13 a.m. A voice, soft, melodic, impossibly distant, echoed across the village. It wasn't human. It wasn't angelic. It was something ancient, a tune sung in a language without breath, a lullaby to lure, to weaken, to open. Children throughout Hemlock's Ferry rose from their beds, walked outside barefoot, and stood in the street facing the chapel. Adults tried to restrain them, but the children moved with unnatural strength, eyes rolled back, bodies slack like puppets held by invisible strings. Inside the orphanage, Nathaniel sat upright in bed. He looked relieved. Sister Miriam grabbed him, begging him to resist whatever force was at work. But the boy said, "They're not calling me, they're calling the ones you forgot." The singing rose to a terrifying crescendo. Windows cracked, doors buckled, horses screamed, and then silence, utter, crushing silence. Children dropped unconscious. Adults collapsed, lamps flickered out. Only Nathaniel remained awake. He looked toward the chapel and whispered, "They found the doorway." Section 9, The Hidden Registry in the Aftermath. Father Reed finally confessed something he had kept hidden for years. There had indeed been other children at the orphanage, dozens of them. Children who were never adopted. Children who never grew older. Children who vanished without explanation over the past 2 decades. But instead of reporting their disappearances, the church elders removed them from the official registry, literally carving out pages, rewriting lists, adjusting numbers. They didn't want the town to know the chapel had a pattern, that the orphanage wasn't a sanctuary, it was a feeding ground. Father Reed retrieved the hidden ledger from a locked compartment beneath his desk. The pages were stained, brittle, terrified. Names crossed out violently, margins filled with notes, taken during night service, found staring at walls for hours, unresponsive, asked to speak with her other mother. Humming in basement again, scratching behind altar, deeper this time. Sister Miriam trembled as she counted the missing names. 31 children, and one of the earliest entries chilled her. November 1008, 152, pair of strangers seen near ferry crossing, tall, unmoving, eyes not reflecting light. The elders had known for years that something hunted their children, something that returned again and again, and the dates of disappearances formed a pattern every 19 years. The last wave was 1853. The next would be 1872. Exactly the year Nathaniel arrived. Section 10, the symbol on Nathaniel's skin after discovering the hidden registry. Sister Miriam examined Nathaniel more carefully. She noticed something she had overlooked, or perhaps something that had changed. On the child's left shoulder, beneath the skin, faintly visible in the lamplight, was a symbol spiraled, jagged, resembling both a root system and an eye. It pulsed faintly, matching the rhythm of the tapping beneath the floors. When she touched it, Nathaniel winced. "My mother put that there," he whispered. "Your real mother?" She asked. "No," he said. "The mother who made me, the mother who is not a mother, the one who remembers children by shaping them." Sister Miriam recoiled. Nathaniel explained haltingly that he was not born. He was constructed using fragments of memory taken from various lost children, those who had been lured, shaped, and consumed by the false parents. "I'm supposed to help them remember themselves," he said. "They use us like mirrors. When we look at them with fear or love or confusion, they see who they used to be." "Who were they?" she asked. Nathaniel's eyes filled with a sorrow too vast for a child. They were people once, but remembering hurts, so they gave up their memories. Then they needed others to hold them. They needed us. The symbol on his skin darkened. That night, as Sister Miriam lay awake, she heard footsteps in the hallway, soft, dragging footsteps, following the exact rhythm of the tapping beneath the chapel. She knew then that whatever created Nathaniel wasn't coming. It was already inside. Section 11, the second disappearance 2 nights later, another child vanished. This time, a boy named Samuel, older, strong, willed, too stubborn to be easily led. He disappeared despite sleeping in a locked dormitory with 3 other children and a nun stationed outside the door. The door was still locked in the morning. but Samuel's bed was empty. On the pillow lay a single black hair, long, thin, and not from any child. This disappearance shattered the last vestiges of control. Parents pulled their children from catechism. Some demanded the orphanage be closed. Others accused the church of harboring devils. A few packed wagons and fled Hemlock's Ferry entirely. Father Reed insisted they must preserve order, but his voice trembled now, his sermons faltered, his eyes darted toward shadows. He finally agreed to let Sister Miriam search Samuel's belongings. She found a small hand-drawn picture in his pocket, Samuel and Nathaniel holding hands, standing beside two taller figures with blank faces. On the back, in shaky handwriting, they came to take him home. Then they asked if I wanted to come too. Sister Miriam's blood chilled. When she showed the drawing to Nathaniel, he simply nodded. They didn't want him. He said, not at first, they wanted me, but I told them he was like me, so they took him. His voice broke slightly. I didn't want them to leave disappointed. Sister Miriam realized with dawning horror that Nathaniel wasn't resisting the entities. He was helping them. Section 12, the attic discovery desperation led the sisters to search every inch of the orphanage. They opened cupboards, storage closets, even climbed into the attic, a narrow space filled with dust and abandoned relics of previous generations. What they found froze their breath. A circle had been carved into the attic floorboards, each line burned into the wood with unnatural precision. At its center lay dozens of small objects, buttons, marbles, bits of fabric, tiny wooden toys, the belongings of children who should not have had belongings up there. These were offerings, or trophies, or memories. Sister Miriam picked up a small cloth shoe. It crumbled in her hands, aged far beyond its years. Embedded in the circle were symbols identical to the one on Nathaniel's shoulder. On the far wall, drawn in what looked like soot or ash, were dozens of silhouettes of children, each with hollow eyes. Some silhouettes were crossed out, some were not. Some had names written beneath them. Nathaniel's silhouette was there too. But unlike the others, his figure was incomplete, missing lines, missing definition, as if he had not been fully remembered yet. Sister Miriam heard footsteps behind her. She spun around. Nathaniel stood at the attic entrance, eyes wide, hands trembling. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said. "What is this place?" she demanded. "It's where they try to remember. This is where they practice being parents." His voice cracked. "And where they decide which children they want to keep." Section 13. The portrait changes the next morning. Father Reed found the portrait of Nathaniel's parents lying on his desk, though he had locked it in a drawer the night before. At first glance, it appeared unchanged. But when he examined it closely, he felt his stomach drop. The man and woman were leaning closer now, their faces sharper, their eyes open wider, almost alive. He summoned Sister Miriam to confirm what he saw. She gasped. The photograph wasn't merely shifting, it was evolving. A third figure had begun to appear faintly between the two adults. A small shape, a child-sized silhouette, blurry and unfinished. Nathaniel. The portrait was completing itself. They locked the picture in a chest, reinforced with iron and scripture, and buried it beneath the chapel floor. Yet that night, the chest rattled violently, and beneath the floorboards, the tapping resumed, but faster now, urgent, eager. When Sister Miriam checked on Nathaniel, she found him kneeling beside his bed, sweating, trembling, whispering in the dark. She knelt beside him. "What are they saying?" Nathaniel looked up. "They're asking why you buried their memory." Section 14. The confession of Father Reed forced by escalating terror. Father Reed confessed the true origin of the orphanage. It had not always been a sanctuary. It was built in 1821 by a secret sect within the church known as the Witnesses of Returning, who believed certain spirits lost, damaged, or ancient could be guided back into human form through proximity to children. children were considered soft clay, unfinished, malleable, moldable, perfect vessels. The earliest records revealed a horrifying truth. St. Armand's home for the lost had been designed not to protect children, but to offer them. Father Reed's voice broke as he read aloud an entry written by the founding rector. "Those without memory will come to us, seeking form. We will give them our young, so they may remember what it is to be human, and in gratitude they will bless our town." But the blessings never came, only disappearances. Only scratching beneath the floors, only singing at night. The sect eventually dissolved, but the orphanage remained. The rituals forgotten, the history buried, until Nathaniel arrived. "He is the last," Father Reed whispered. The last attempt they made at shaping a child. The last vessel. Sister Miriam realized the truth. Nathaniel wasn't a victim. He was the bridge. Section 15. Nathaniel remembers that evening. Nathaniel experienced a violent seizure. His body contorted, back arching, limbs shaking. When Sister Miriam and 2 nuns restrained him, his skin rippled, as if something beneath it was shifting, crawling, rearranging. The symbol on his shoulder glowed faintly beneath the flesh. Moments later, he went still, then he spoke. But it wasn't his voice. His words came slow, ancient, resonant, layered with tones impossible for a child's throat. "We remember the first children, the ones you gave us. We remember their warmth, their breath, their fear. We remember your promises. You broke them." Sister Miriam's heart pounded. Nathaniel continued, "You closed the doorway. You stopped the offerings. You starved us." Sister Miriam whispered, "Who are you?" Nathaniel's mouth twisted, his eyes unfocused. "We are what remains when a family forgets itself." Suddenly he gasped, falling forward, his voice returning to normal. "They're angry," he whispered. "They thought I was the last gift, but you buried their memory. They can't find themselves." He clutched Sister Miriam's arm with bruising strength. "If they cannot remember who they used to be, they will make new parents from whoever they can reach." A chill ran through every sister in the room. "You must burn the portrait," Nathaniel pleaded, "before they finish it." Section 16. The awakening beneath the chapel, determined to end the nightmare. Father Reed gathered the nuns to retrieve the buried chest. But when they opened the chapel floor, the chest was gone, and in its place was a hole, a deep, narrow cavity descending into blackness. Cold air breathed upward, wet, rotten, alive. From the depths came the sound of voices, layered, childlike. Some crying, some humming, some whispering a name. "Nathaniel, Nathaniel," Sister Miriam vomited from sheer terror. They lowered a lantern into the hole. Its light flickered, then extinguished. Something unseen moved like liquid across the stone floor, retreating from the glow. Father Reed, trembling, declared they must seal the chapel immediately. But before they could block the opening, something rose from the depths, a shape small and frail. A child, but not alive. Its face was blank, smooth, featureless, as if someone had tried to sculpt a child from memory, but forgotten how a face was supposed to look. It reached for Sister Miriam. She screamed and backed away, but the faceless child only tilted its head, disappointed, confused. Its fingers twitched, searching, grasping. Then more shapes emerged behind it, small, silent, wrong. The forgotten ones, the unfinished ones, the ones the orphanage had once offered, and they were climbing. Section 17. The night of flames in blind panic. The nuns barricaded the chapel and fled with the remaining children into the storm outside. Rain poured, wind howled, but the chapel shook with inhuman movement, scratching, pounding, scraping along the stone walls as the faceless children tried to escape. Nathaniel stood motionless in the courtyard, watching. "They're not angry at you," he said quietly. "They're angry at me. I left them. I grew too fast. I became too real. Father Reed grabbed him. Tell us how to stop them. Nathaniel looked toward the chapel, then toward the sky. You can't stop them, but you can confuse them. Fire makes them forget what they were trying to remember. The rector cursed under his breath. The decision was made. They set the chapel ablaze. Flames devoured the wooden beams. Stained glass exploded. Smoke billowed into the night sky as the ancient foundation cracked under the heat. Screams rose from beneath the floorboards. Not human screams, not childlike, something deeper, something older, something remembering its own pain. Sister Miriam held Nathaniel tightly. Will it be enough? She asked. Nathaniel shook his head, tears in his eyes. It will only make them forget for a little while. The chapel collapsed in a shower of embers, but when the fire finally died, the portrait was lying in the ashes, completely untouched. Section 18. The final completion in the smoldering ruins of the chapel. The portrait gleamed as if polished. Sister Miriam approached it with dread. Her breath caught. The image was now complete. The man and woman sat upright, clear, lifelike. Their expressions warm, almost parental, and between them sat a small child, Nathaniel, perfectly rendered. Smiling faintly, Sister Miriam dropped the portrait, trembling violently. Nathaniel approached, staring at the image with quiet awe. They finished remembering. He whispered, They don't need the others anymore. The ground beneath them rumbled. From beneath the ashes came a low groaning sound, like a house waking, stretching, recalling its shape after centuries of sleep. A figure emerged slowly, not faceless, not distorted. A woman, pale as moonlight, her features sharp but serene. Her eyes bottomless, the mother. Behind her came the father, tall, rigid, his movements deliberate. They didn't attack, they didn't scream, they simply walked toward Nathaniel. He didn't move. Sister Miriam grabbed him, sobbing, Don't go with them, they're not your parents. Nathaniel looked at her with heartbreaking tenderness. They're not anyone's parents, but they made me, and I'm the only thing they remember clearly. He stepped forward. The mother touched his cheek with trembling fingers, fingers far too long. Nathaniel smiled faintly, and then all three vanished, as if inhaled into a single point of darkness. Section 19. The aftermath. The following weeks were a blur. The remaining orphans were evacuated. The town shut down the orphanage. The ruins of the chapel were left untouched, fenced off, declared dangerously unstable. But the truth was simpler. No one dared disturb it again. Father Reed resigned and left town. He died a year later, raving about hollow families and children who never learned how to sleep. Sister Miriam kept the surviving children together, relocating them to a distant convent. But at night, she would wake to tapping sounds in her room. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps again. She prayed harder, but prayers felt thin, weak, exposed. The townspeople whispered that sometimes at dusk, they saw a small boy walking along the riverbank barefoot, quiet, staring at the water as if waiting for someone. Others claimed to see a tall woman standing beside him, her hand gently resting on his shoulder. But no one ever approached, and no one ever looked at the ruins of St. Armand's the same way again. The portrait was never found. But occasionally, in homes across Hemlock's Ferry, people reported receiving unmarked parcels on their doorsteps. Inside each one, a daguerreotype. Different families every time, but always with a child sitting between 2 adults who did not look quite right. Section 20. The documentary conclusion. Narrator. Dark, steady. Hemlock's Ferry still exists, but the orphanage is gone, the chapel is gone, and the names of the missing children have been erased from most public records. Officially, the town experienced a period of unrest and structural collapse in 1872. Unofficially, the truth was far worse. Fade to black. The events of that year represent one of the most disturbing chapters of forgotten American folklore the belief that certain entities mimic the most sacred bonds of family in order to reclaim something they lost. In Hemlock's Ferry, they called them the parentless ones, but other cultures have known them under different names: hollow kin, memory eaters, and the unfinished. A chilling pause. What happened to Nathaniel remains unknown. The children who claimed to see him decades later insisted he wasn't aging, that he watched them from a distance as if studying them, as if remembering them, soft, distant, tapping echoes. One thing is certain, the portrait he held in death was not a family photograph. It was a doorway, a memory being rebuilt, and in the end it remembered him back, beat. And if a photograph ever appears at your doorstep, one showing parents you do not recognize, and a child who looks too much like someone you used to know, do not keep it. Do not study it. Do not let it remember you. A screen fades to black. End.